Good evening, everyone. I'm Walda Roseman, chair of the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation, and your MC for the evening. I want to welcome those of you who are with us in this beautiful theater at Maison Française in Washington, D.C., and also welcome those of you who are watching us virtually. We're really excited because we're pretty convinced that we're going to be offering you a very interesting and stimulating program. Arthur C. Clarke was a scientist, a science fiction writer, a wit, and a visionary. He led with his imagination, coupled with the rigors of science and technology. He did his best work, we're told, while listening to classical music. He was a diver who trained himself to hold his breath for extraordinarily long periods. And he dreamed of venturing into space and beyond. He spent a lot of his life trying to convince those non-believers that it was actually possible. Guess who was right? He made a mission to popularize science and worried about the future of planet Earth and those of us who inhabit it. And he warned us to remember that when looking at screens, data is not information, and information is not vision. Wise words, and one that connects us directly to imagination. That Sir Arthur also challenged us, saying, if you want to understand what's possible, it may be necessary to wander a bit into the impossible. That, my friends, describes imagination. The Arthur C. Clarke Foundation's Unleash Imagination, Shape the Future is designed to recognize and promote imagination as a powerful means of deriving fresh and effective approaches for resolving today's and tomorrow's most difficult challenges. Think back to your education, your workplace, and the approaches that we and our leaders take to tackle looming shadows cast on today, as well as on our inheritance to our children and grandchildren. To what extent do we, our young people included, find encouragement to create, innovate, try something new? Or do other values, directly or indirectly, discourage our trying that something new? Values such as efficiency, time, cost, teaching to standardized and other tests, job performance measurements, meeting quarterly financial projections, or keeping within safe political guardrails. These may, and indeed do, each have their importance, but can we also motivate our leaders, young and older, corporate, government, educators, and others, to deliberately make room for also fostering greater creativity as an essential element in critical decision making? And can we infuse into society a priority on communication and collaboration between generations? The young people often have fresh ideas to be considered, and after all, will provide us with our next wave of leadership. The Clarke Foundation, through your donations, will continue to work to move the needle on imagination forward. Now, let me turn us to what we're here to celebrate and contemplate, our three awardees and our Clarke Conversation on Imagination. We're delighted to recognize this year two extraordinary individuals and an amazing program mainstay who have made contributions that greatly benefit society. You will find more about each of them in your programs. And as I mentioned to those at dinner, there is a QR code for those who don't have access to that and those online, you will find that on our website under the program for this evening. In addition, those of you who who were here for dinner, were able to watch, albeit without much sound tonight, the videoed interviews of each awardee. We have Greg Reeder of SAP NS2 to thank for those wonderful interviews of Samuel Delaney and Michio Kaku. And we can thank the production team of WGBH for the interviews of Nova. All of our audience can find those interviews, as I said, on the clarkefoundation.org website. So let me begin by interviewing Brian Keaton. You will find a slide for Brian. And in addition to what you see on that slide, let me just note that he is, among many other things, also Associate Director of our sister organization, the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination at UCSD. And by the way, the director of that center, Eric Vire, is also here, and I hope you'll take a chance to meet him at dessert and coffee if you haven't already. Brian will introduce the 2021 recipient for the Arthur C. Clarke Lifetime Achievement Award, Michio Kaku. Brian, can you come out? Take it away.
Thank you, Walda. You told me to keep it short, but I am a cosmologist. I study billions of year-old objects. Short is in the eye of the beholder. What an amazing panel of honorees we have tonight. Nova, I've been watching since I was a wee lad. Sam, amazing intellect. And of course, one of my mentors in the profession of professing as an astronomer, as a scientist, as a physicist, Michio Kaku, who is, among many things, appropriately situated at this venue because he is an ambassador. He is an ambassador to inspire millions of minds throughout the multiverse that is connecting together our most basic essence of humanity, which I believe is imagination. I believe this is shared among all of us here tonight. In addition to half a dozen or more bestsellers, he is one of the founding directors of the program that we know as string theory, co-inventing it, co-discovering it, if you will, back as a young man himself almost 50 years ago. And in honor of his creation of this new field of string field theory, I've decided to cut the homework assignment down from 10 pages and 10 dimensions down to 5 dimensions and only 5 pages. So you will have Michio to thank for that. Now you can use all the approximations that you like. Now he's a physicist. He only considers the grandest of all possible questions. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing him twice, not because he came back on the Into the Impossible podcast, which I run at the UCSD's Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination, because I screwed up and I didn't press the record button. Yes, I'm an experimental physicist. But he was gracious enough to come back on and record an entire new episode in the midst of a publicity tour that saw him going on Gayle King, and who am I to him? But he is in the tradition of, as his most recent book, the best-selling book, The God Equation, taking up the worthy mantle of an intellectual heir to his, and not just because of the hair, but it's Albert Einstein. And the mission that Michio never shies away from is to be commended. And I think he has contributed iconically to our public understanding, not only as a communicator, a naturally gifted communicator, but also as an honest-to-goodness practicing physicist, doing the hard work, paying the dues, and coming up with inspiration for the next generation of educators as well. He's deeply influential. I remember reading his book, Hyperspace, when I was a graduate student, beginning graduate student, and it's gone through many iterations on my library, and now my kids are actually picking it up. It's quite a treat. And he's not only known for his writing, but also his communications, his articles, his podcasts, his radio show, and you can find out all about him on his website. So I think it's quite befitting, as I say, to host one of the foremost ambassadors that we have in our time, in our day, someone who's doing the hard work of a scientist, but also with that rare gift of communicating to the public. And I wish that you will please join me in honoring and welcoming Dr. Michio Kaku, whose intellect, as I say, is as rare as a top quark is in a Large Hadron Collider.
Right. Thank you very much. After such a great introduction, I can't wait to hear the speaker myself. Thank you very much. It's been a great honor in the memory of Arthur C. Clarke. Mhm.
I'm very pleased now to introduce the person who will introduce Nova, our winner of the Innovator Award, and the two people who are the executive co-producers of Nova, Julia Court and Chris Schmidt. I'm happy to introduce Paula Kerger, who is the president and CEO of PBS. Paula, would you come out here, please?
Good evening. What a great night this is. It is so terrific. It's so terrific to be with anyone right now, right? But it's so wonderful to be in this beautiful embassy. And I just want to thank the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation for bringing us all together for this great celebration. I am deeply grateful to the foundation for all that you do to celebrate and advance the field of science, which so beautifully aligns with the mission and the work of public television. Tonight, I have the great honor to present the 2021 Innovator Award to Nova, the longest running science series on television. I cannot overstate Nova's extraordinary impact. For nearly 5 decades, the award-winning series has brought the best of science programming to homes and classrooms across America, revealing how science touches every facet of our lives, helping us better understand our connection to this planet, and hopefully inspiring the next generation of scientists. During my time at PBS, I've heard countless stories from people who tell us that their curiosity about the world and all of its wonders began on Nova. Throughout its storied history, Nova has sparked the imaginations of millions of people, making science exciting, engaging, and inspiring. And I think we need that sentiment now more than ever. They bring the magic of science to people from all backgrounds and walks of life, and they've done extraordinarily important work to reflect and reach diverse communities who haven't historically been represented in the field. When you think about it, there's a beautiful synergy between science and storytelling, because the best science tells a story, helping us translate the world and our place in it, and this is what Nova does so beautifully. Nova's co-produced by 2 extraordinary filmmakers and I would say great science communicators with deep roots in public television. Julia Court has contributed to more than 100 films and miniseries covering everything from quantum mechanics to genetic engineering to climate change. And Chris Schmidt has developed and contributed to groundbreaking films and series such as The Planets, Black Hole Apocalypse, Breaking North America. My date for tonight is Kirk Johnson from the Museum of Natural History is the star of Making North America, and more. Their vast portfolio of work has been recognized with numerous prestigious awards, including Peabody, the News and Documentary Emmys, and the Alfred I. DuPont Columbia Award. We are grateful that they continue to share their talent, passion, and leadership with public television. And speaking as a young girl science geek, Nova was very important to me as a young person growing up. You have no idea how many young people who win the great science prizes, and go on to extraordinary careers had their minds opened for the first time by NOVA. It is a huge contribution that they have made over the last 50 years, and we look forward to the many contributions they'll make to the next 50 years. I am delighted to present the Sir Arthur Clarke Innovators Award to my colleagues and friends, Julia Court and Chris Schmidt.
Thank you so much, Paula. It means so much to us to have you here. We are honored to accept this award, the Innovators Award, on behalf of all of NOVA. We're so grateful to be here with you all to celebrate the spirit of Arthur C. Clarke and to be recognized alongside Michio Kaku and Chip Delaney, whose work exemplifies a love of science and the power of human imagination. We're accepting the award on behalf of all the people whose imagination, curiosity, and passion for science have contributed to NOVA over the last 48 years.
From the series founder, Michael Ambrosino, to Paula Apsel, who led NOVA for over 30 years, and to the many producers, editors, researchers, writers, all of the great staff at NOVA, and of course the scientists and viewers who together have helped NOVA illuminate the creativity, joy, and transformative power of the scientific process. We look forward to continuing this great work, and we would like to thank we couldn't possibly do it without the vision and support of PBS under the inspirational leader of Paula Kerger and our home institution, GBH Boston. We are honored to steward NOVA for the next generation and stoke curiosity and imagination in audiences here and around the world. Thank you so much.
Let's stand in front here. So
in front? Okay.
Okay, so many of us.
Touch the award.
Thank you.
And now I have the great pleasure to introduce Kim Stanley Robinson. Stan was the 2017 winner of the Imagination and Service to Society Award, the same award that he is presenting to his mentor this evening, Samuel Delaney. We're very happy to have him back and very happy to have Chip, as he calls himself, with us to accept this. Stan?
Thank you. If you were to read Samuel R. Delaney's first journals, which were recently published in a book called In Search of Silence, you'd see a young man filled with interesting thoughts, strong feelings, and creative urges. A lot of us are like that. But what happened was he started to read science fiction. He read writers like Theodore Sturgeon, Alfred Bester, Walter Miller Jr., Kate Wilhelm, Damon Knight, maybe even the spacey and poetical stories of Arthur C. Clarke, I don't know. The effect was like running a bunch of iron filings through a magnetic field. What emerged was a whole artist, coherent to himself and impressive to readers. So in just a few years after that, his novels and stories had launched him into the stratosphere of and established him as one of the most talented and important science fiction writers, not only of his own brilliant generation, but in the entire history of science fiction. So that's why we're here. I will not list his many novels and memoirs and books of criticism and commentary now. That would take too long, but I do want to pause briefly to note that his novel Dahlgren, an underground bestseller after its publication in 1975, has emerged in the decades since to become regarded as the great novel of New York City and the great novel of the 1970s. Neither of these are easy topics to pull off in a novel. And combining two such feats of historical imagination in a single, vast, complex, and heartfelt novel makes Dahlgren something special. It's a strong candidate for the mythical great American novel, and for sure, it's a permanent part of American and world literature. So, with that book in his back pocket, he has continued to challenge himself in an ongoing flow of wonderful works, taking a compassionate eye and a sharp political consciousness to affords a uniquely critical but positive, even utopian vision on matters of race, gender, and class, and matters that are too rarely discussed in other books. Life on the street, to which too many are condemned, the life of the body, which all of us are daily absorbed in, and American speech as actually spoken by actual Americans. There's nothing else like what he's done, which in itself is a rare feat. Now, I'm happy to end this celebration on a personal note. Chip Delaney was the first writer I ever met at the Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop in the summer of 1975. He was our first week teacher, and he set the tone for the entire Clarion experience. He was 33, I was 23. He had recently published Dahlgren, which I had read twice, and I had sold 2 stories, not yet published. I craved his approval and praise, and that's not what I got. What I got was better than that. I got encouragement. Chip read my stories with close attention, and he was always, for everybody in that class, fully engaged and straightforward in his manner. There was no bullshit in him. He was polite, but direct. And he said to me, Stan, these stories of yours are pretty good, but you don't want to get stuck at this level. Think of it as plateaus and cliffs. You're on a certain plateau, and then the job is to climb the next cliff and get up to a higher plateau. And that should go on forever. So I've kept that thought in mind ever since, and it's often been an encouragement to me. And it occurs to me now that him, having finished Dahlgren, must have been such a high plateau of achievement, must have been pondering where the next cliff was and how he might get up it. That would be the great utopian novel Triton, by the way. In the years since then, I've only crossed paths maybe a dozen times at most with Chip, always very memorable and exciting for me. Once when I was living in DC, I asked him if it would be foolish of me to write about the young men of color that I saw in the tiny triangle park up where one of the many tiny triangle parks up where Northwest runs into Northeast. I was too ignorant. I was sure to get things wrong. And I was living there, though, and a story was coming to me. Just try it, Chip said. You will get things wrong, but it's the trying that matters. I've kept that in mind, too. I've enjoyed those few times hanging out with the maestro in the years that have passed. And I've learned that he's not only a great writer, but also a great person, gracious and kindly. So it's a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce him tonight. Now you gotta talk.
Okay. There's only one thing one can say in a situation like this. It's thank you. It's rare that one gets an award just for writing. Often
it's because you're a lecturer, or you are a teacher, or you're somebody who appears on television. And I have great respect for people like um, Michio, who is a, a broad teacher. I'm not. All I do is write and occasionally talk about it to students. And for getting an award for that, I'm really surprised. Thank you.
Where's Stan? Oh, good. You want Stan? We want to make sure that. And I'm going to get in front here. You'll notice that there's very little stuffy about these awards, particularly the posing afterwards. But it does not diminish the esteem with which we hold the awardees. Not at all. I want to now turn to the Clark conversation on imagination, fracturing the box with fresh ideas for an ailing world. We're very pleased to have as our moderator tonight Steve Scully, former C SPAN journalist and currently Senior VP for the Bipartisan Policy Center. He has come to us fresh from moderating a panel in Pennsylvania that included President Bush. And he has been excited about this evening as well. We can't give him a president, but we can give him some great people here. So with that, let me welcome Steve, and I turn the evening over to you.
Good evening, everyone. You know, as I look at this gathering, I'm reminded what President Kennedy once said about the passion and brilliance and intellect in a single room. I feel that way on the stage here tonight. The last time that happened was when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. So I am humbled to be here with so many terrific people. Imagination. I mean, it really is, it's one of those words that just conjures up so many different thoughts and memories and ideas. So, Julie, I'm going to begin with you and imagine the future, not 100 or 1,000 years from now, but the next 40 to 50 years. What do you see?
Well, I think a lot about what we're going to discover, because that's a lot of the stories that we tell is all about what has science revealed about the universe, the world, the environment, ourselves. And we were I've been at NOVA for about 30 years, and thinking about all the things that we have discovered, that the collective we and scientists have discovered in the last 30 years, some of it could have been imagined, but so much of it could not have been imagined. If you think about dark energy and the acceleration of the universe, who could have imagined that? And I think the most interesting things about the next 50 years are things that have not been imagined and that we won't imagine. I am incredibly excited about the James Webb Space Telescope, which is launching in just a few weeks and is going to see further into the universe than we've ever seen before, into the past, and is going to be able to sniff out the atmospheres of exoplanets to see if there are chemical signatures of life. I think we're going to be discovering things just even in the next 5 to 10 years that is going to spark our imagination in new ways. So I think for me, it's the things we haven't thought of. It's the questions we haven't asked yet that I'm most excited about.
And Chris, you get to produce award-winning documentaries about what's ahead. So what are your thoughts?
So this is if the singularity doesn't happen. Right? So I guess I think, well, 50 years in the future, the one thing I notice about predicting the future is that I think if you look back, if you were able to go back 50 years and look at today, I agree with Julia. There's a lot of things that have emerged that we never would have predicted. But people have a tendency to predict sort of utopia or dystopia. And I think from any vantage point, if you go back in time and look ahead, what actually seems to happen is a kind of a muddle through, right? Unexpected things emerge, we deal with them and we adapt. So the real question to me about predicting the future is you have to decide if you're on the optimist or the pessimist side of things. I'm a natural optimist. And so I assume that in 50 years, if I were alive or if I'm alive in 50 years, I will be of a mind that I am today, which is I would not want to live 50 years earlier. So I do believe that there will be sort of betterness in general, not dramatic betterness, but there will be betterness in many ways. But in terms of like what Julia was talking about with discoveries, I'll give two predictions of discoveries. I'm just undercutting my entire previous argument because I'm going to make two predictions. One of them is that I was thinking about technology when you said 50 years. So I think technology will become largely invisible and will become more and more part of us in ways that we think we can kind of imagine now, but we can't probably really imagine the extent of that. And the other big thing I think will happen is that I think that maybe with the James Webb Telescope, we'll find evidence of life someplace else. And that will be so incredibly important because if you think about it, physics and chemistry operate by principles and laws that we can define. And we expect that those principles and laws hold true anywhere in the universe, right? A helium atom is a helium atom. The particles that make up an atom are the particles that make up an atom, no matter where you are. We assume that the speed of light is constant throughout the universe, that the laws of gravity, Einstein's general theory works throughout the universe. When you look at biology, right? Biology, in a sense, is not a science like the other two because we only have one instance of it. So this big question, is biology here the only instance of biology anywhere? I think it's reasonable to expect it's not, but once it's discovered someplace else, once you have two instances of it, then you have the foundation to build physical laws about biology that pertain most likely throughout the universe in the same way that we have for physics and chemistry. And I think that will be absolutely mind-blowing. It's hard for us right now to define what life is. I think that will get a little bit easier if we find something that is recognizable as life. And I think that something like the theory of evolution or evolution will turn out to be something that operates based on very simple, repeatable principle, rules and laws like we see on the other side. So that's my one tiny slice of the maelstrom in my head right now when you ask that question.
So by the way, you could ask your questions as well and at home, so submit it. We'll get to those and also those in the audience. And Dr. Kaku, you've given this a lot of thought. So the next 50 years, your forecast both for good and for bad.
Well, I've done a lot of TV shows for BBC television and the Discovery Channel and the Science Channel, and I get to interview these great minds. I would ask them the question, is there intelligent life on the Earth? And watching TV science programs, I am convinced there's no intelligent life on this planet except
PBS.
for Nova.
Yes.
I think Nova shows that there is intelligent life on this planet. Now, people ask me a simple question. I'm a physicist. What does a physicist do anyway? What we do is we invent the future. Back in the early 1800s, we invented the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of heat. That allows us to quantify the heat engine, to create the locomotive, to create the engine for the factories, to initiate the Industrial Revolution. The greatest revolution in the history of humankind was initiated when we physicists worked out mechanics and thermodynamics. A few decades after that, Maxwell and Faraday worked out electricity and magnetism, giving us dynamos, generators, light bulbs, the electric revolution in the late 1800s. And then in the 1900s, we physicists worked out the quantum theory, which gave us the laser, the transistor, the internet, the whole computer age created by that discovery. And now we're into the next phase, the fourth wave. The fourth wave is physics at the molecular level. That is artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and biotechnology. And in my works, I even talk about the fifth wave. The fifth wave we won't see for several more decades, perhaps by the mid-century or the late 21st century. The fifth wave is physics at the atomic level, meaning, first of all, fusion power. Even though fusion power has been oversold, we will turn on the first fusion reactor in 3 years, we think, in southern France. And by mid-century, we may have commercial fusion reactors. Second, quantum computers. Silicon Valley will become a rust belt. We'll have unemployment, perhaps, in Silicon Valley because the age of silicon is coming to a close. We're going to go from silicon power to quantum computers because we're going to have transistors the size of atoms. At that point, silicon is unstable. Silicon cannot compute at that level. We're going to go to quantum computers, which gives the CIA headaches because you can crack any known code using, in principle, a quantum computer. But we can also solve quantum problems. The greatest quantum architect is Mother Nature. Mother Nature can take hamburgers and French fries and convert it into a baby in 9 months. That is one of the greatest feats of nanotechnology that we've ever seen. We can't even come close to doing that, to turn hamburgers into human babies in 9 months, atom for atom. And third, BrainNet. I think eventually we will connect the human brain to the internet. We will communicate telepathically. We will send emotions, feelings, memories on the internet in what I call the fifth revolution. And then people ask me, isn't there a hidden defect in all this? What happens when the robots take over? Okay. Well, let me say a few things about that. Some people talk about the singularity when robots take over because Moore's law says computer power doubles every 18 months and the robots take over. Well, it turns out that Moore's law will collapse. In fact, it's already slowing down. You can talk to any computer scientist and they'll say, yeah, Moore's law is slowing down. Every Christmas, we assume that our presents are twice as powerful as the previous Christmas. Those days are gone, okay? With that, we have to have a new generation of computers. So the singularity, that is when the robots take over, depends upon Moore's law extending forever. And that's not going to happen. So that's the good news. There's still time for humans. So how smart are our most advanced robots? You can take our most advanced military robot and put it in the forest. What will that advanced robot do? First, get lost. Second, fall over. And third, can't even get up. Okay, that's our most advanced military robot. A cockroach can do better than that. Okay? So, but eventually, let's face it, they'll be as smart as a cockroach, then as smart as a mouse, then as smart as a rat, then as smart as a rabbit, and eventually as smart as a dog or a cat. And finally, by the end of the century, I think perhaps as smart as a monkey. At that point, by the end of the century, I think they're potentially dangerous because monkeys know they are monkeys. They are self-aware. They know they're not human. Now, dogs are confused. Dogs think that we are a dog. That's why they obey us.
How
We're
do you
the
know
top
that?
dog. Not that we asked our pet dog tonight, but the dogs think that we are the top dog and they're the underdog. But by the time the robots become as smart as monkeys, they're self-aware. They know they're not human. And at that point, they are potentially dangerous. So I think we should put a chip in their brain once they attain that status to shut them off if they have murderous thoughts. And then the last question is,
Sure.
what happens 200 years in the future when the robots are so smart, they remove that chip? At that point, I think we're in deep doo-doo. At that point, I think we should merge with them. We should become supermen and superwomen and merge with our creation, rather than compete with our creation. But look, we got 200 years to decide that question.
So speaking of Chip,
Well, when I think about 40 years from now, the first thing I think is I'm not going to be here. And it doesn't bother me particularly. I'm perfectly happy with that. When I think about dogs, there's a wonderful little book that years ago when I was a professor before I had retired, that I used to teach and have great fun with. And that's Virginia Woolf's little book, Flush, which is a biography of the Cocker Spaniel that was owned by Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning. And it's her attempt to write a book about from the point of view of a dog. She does a very good job. She did a very good job in about 1937, which leads me back to the thing that I thought we were going to talk about, and I think we are. We're talking about imagination, and I remember, what is imagination basically? Well, if you were an imaginative kid, this is the experience I think all imaginative kids have, is adults tell you, why are you lying like that? Imaginative kids are the kids who tell lies. That's the first way imagination manifests itself. You tell lies. I had an imaginary friend named Octopus. And I would, anytime anybody did anything wrong, I'd say, Octopus did it. Drove my dad crazy. And eventually he got so angry, he decided to murder my imaginary friend. Threw it in the garbage pit. There's Octopus. But the imagination bothers most people. The guy who is most concerned with being the successful businessman, which was my dad, is the one who is most, why can't you just tell the truth and be normal like everybody? Why do you have to have an imaginary friend? But the thing is, of course, as soon as my imaginary friend was murdered, I got another one. His name, which I had never heard before, I read it. I had no idea what it is. I read it in a comic book, in a story, and his name was Wolverine. And he was my imaginary friend for the next 10 years, well before Marvel ever thought about having a character like that. And I'm very glad I had it. It made life a lot easier. Finally, I learned how to make a little bit of money from telling lies like that, which is, I think, is a much more, it's a smaller thing than the wonderful and great visions that Michio is thinking about. But I think that's one of the things that imagination does. We learn how to tell lies in a culturally acceptable way.
Chris,
I had two imaginary friends.
There you go.
Sadie,
Octopus?
Sadie and Oomph.
There you go. Yeah.
How long did they live?
They're
still
here right
alive.
now.
So Julia talked about the Webb telescope, and it is so fascinating because what you do at NOVA is you tell a story. So for you, Chris, first, what are the great untold stories that still spark your curiosity, your imagination?
For Nova, like potential Nova stories?
Yes,
Yeah.
and for you personally.
Oh boy. Let's see.
Well, there's
Well-
cryptocurrency.
Well, yeah, so I mean, a little bit about the Nova process, right? So there are lots of things that, I'm a voracious reader and I'm curious about tons of things.
And we're always trying to think about, can we tell a story about this or that topic in a way that will work as a Nova film and so on. And a lot of times we wait until, this is just a little preamble, we wait until we get to a point where we think that the thing that we want to tell the story about is just kind of bubbling up in the minds of enough people in the public that they'll go, yeah, I want to know about that, right? So like Julia mentioned cryptocurrency. So that's something we're wrestling with a little bit right now because, the challenge is to tell a really engaging story, but also to help viewers understand something that they're curious about, right? So our films are a little bit like detective stories. And to some extent, we don't make films where we don't know exactly where the story is headed. We don't have the luxury to sit down and tell a story without knowing the ending. Like, I don't want to pretend like I know your process, Chip, but I would bet there's sometimes you sit down to tell a story and you discover it as you write it. To some
That's
extent.
one of the things that happens.
Yeah, and
Can happen.
we can't. Yes, and we don't do that. We can't. Well, our films will change. We'll discover things while we're making them, but we just have to wait for this moment where we actually have a story to tell. So with the web example, for example, we've been talking about that film for a long time, and the question is, you don't want to make a film where you're only telling chapter one of a story, but sometimes you can't wait until the story is completely finished. So we try to find a place where the story will have a satisfying ending and still offer the hope and the possibility of much more to come. So with web, we finally decided the time was right to tell the story because we can, and we work within the constraints of how much money we can spend and how long we can spend making a film. So we realized that we talked for quite a while, like what would be the climax of our story? Would it be the launch of the web because it had been so plagued by so many problems and getting it off the ground would be an amazing achievement? We finally decided, no, we're going to wait. We're going to tell a story that will tell the story of James Webb Telescope coming up to today, and then we'll follow the story to first light once it's in place because it has to jump a bunch of hurdles that are one unprecedented thing after another. But in terms of stories, things that I would like to tell that we aren't currently telling, I'm very wary of superlatives like most, but I'll tell you something that I'm really interested in. I was talking about this a little bit at dinner. So here's a thing I would love to make, and we need to raise money for it. So if you have anything left over after you bid millions of dollars at the auction, you can come and talk to us. But I really want to make a 3-part series about color. And the reason for that is I think that it's got all the elements that would make a fantastic, popular Nova program because you can look at color from so many different angles and through storytelling really reveal some deep principles. I mean, there's the physics and chemistry of color. There's the color in the living world. There's color in the the richest part of it probably is the human experience of color, which is incredibly rich and deep. And my dream for that is to have, we make films that sometimes are just kind of straightforward documentaries, usually narrated, interviews with people, following people around on various activities and scenes. Sometimes we make films that are hosted, where we have a person who's basically taking the viewer through the program. Sometimes those are films with the hosts are experts in the field, like we've had Neil deGrasse Tyson or Fabric to the Cosmos. Brian Greene. I was going to count Brian Cox. But occasionally we'll make a film where we have a host who's like the viewer who doesn't know something, and so we can send that.
Would be me.
We can send that host out on, but you have to be really good on camera. We can send that host out into the world on a quest to understand something, kind of as a stand-in for the viewer, really. So they're not the expert telling the viewer. The viewer goes along for a ride. So my dream for this color series would be to have a host who's an art, somebody, and you want that, ideally you want that host's story to be authentic in the sense that as a viewer, you buy into their quest and you're pulling for them and you want them to succeed and you want them to discover things. So, if you can just hire somebody who's a good TV personality and do it, and it would probably be okay. But if you can get a host who has a little, even though we may be saying, look, we want you to go on this quest, we're going to send you on this quest. but we want you to have a genuine interest in this. So my dream for that would be to a host who's an artist, somebody who uses color in their work, but who credibly wants to understand color on a different level. And my real dream is that this artist would be colorblind. And the idea that a colorblind that
I know one.
do you? There are a surprising number of artists who are
Yes,
colorblind.
yes, Howard Jenkins.
And somebody who is colorblind. There are artists who are colorblind who use color. I have one of my oldest friends was a director, directed a bunch of animated films for DreamWorks Animation, and he's colorblind. He's a great graphic artist and stuff, but he's colorblind. And they have so to me the idea of here's this person whose artwork itself is fascinating that could be part of the program, who basically you buy the idea that they want to understand color, and they would go on and what we do is we bring them into contact with people working in different, they wouldn't necessarily only be talking to scientists, they'd be talking to other people who use color and understand color and so on. So you basically you have the idea, from the ground floor you have, well, imagine Earth before life, right? Not a very colorful place. But you can really understand where the color of minerals comes from and things like that. It's chemistry, it's physics. Now you bring in the living world, and you've got a whole new palette of colors, and color doing different things, right? Color as a means of communication. Color, color warning, this is poisonous, or color saying, come over here, I'm hot for you, or whatever. And then, of course, you bring human beings and you bring self-awareness in play and culture and things like that, and you get a whole other way of color. So I think that's to me would be an amazing project, because you would come out of it with a totally different appreciation for color. And I will say one other quick thing. We are working on we are hoping to do a 3-part series. So this is sort of similar. It's another sort of big topic. So I think my feeling is that everybody knows what the word engineering is, but most people can't tell you what is engineering. And I think it's because it's such a ubiquitous. I think engineering with a little e is actually the oldest and most fundamental human activity, because it really is problem solving with your hands, with making things. And we have an idea to make a multi-part series about engineering, where you it's not just like, here's how you build a truss, and here's how you direct energy, but a kind of a film where you're immersed in engineering stories, where the emphasis is on engineering as an iterative, collaborative, hands-on process, not as a thing, but as a process. And so that's something, I think of color and engineering sort of in the same way. They're these big ideas, but if you can really tell powerful stories about them in a way that, without banging the viewer over the head with definitions and this and that, you'll come away with an experience that will make you look around and go, wow, and that's engineered, that's engineered, everything's engineered.
Mm-hmm.
I think you say color. I believe Goethe wrote a book about color.
I haven't read it.
Yeah, huh?
I haven't read it.
Yeah,
or at least not in the original.
Yeah, no, neither have I. But I did look at it. I looked at some translations of it years and years ago.
It's fascinating. Yeah. It's one of those things you take for granted.
Yeah.
But it's completely fascinating.
So what's the great untold story? What sparks your curiosity, your imagination?
Oh,
Outside of color.
outside of color. That's
The
it.
7. We were just talking about.
Well, this Eric asked me. This is sort of an in joke.
It's a good idea, though.
But I have wanted for a long time to do a series on our precious bodily fluids. And it is true that,
I never thought of it.
but in terms of biology, there's so many wonders inside of all of our bodies. And I'm definitely interested in some of those stories that are going up against, taboos that we don't, that make us uncomfortable. But it's all part of life and why we're here. I mean, we wouldn't be here without all of these things that sometimes make us go, ick. But so I do love those stories. I'm sort of known at Nova as the person, like, if you can get poop into your story, then I'm gonna love it. And we actually have a whole show coming up in a few months We haven't figured out quite the title, but it might be When Nature Calls. But it's about biologists who specialize in scat, who basically study animals and the environment through their scat that they leave behind. And it's actually a brilliant way to study animals because you don't have to confront them or find them or be in the same place at the same time with them, but they leave these traces. And there's so much information there. There's their DNA. There's the DNA of everything that they eat. Everything that we consume has DNA. It comes, from, I hope, what you've been eating. It tells, it's how they communicate with one another. So this is, one of the really cool stories in this film, which is a great mystery of scat, is that wombats, who are completely adorable, are the only animal on the planet that poop in cubes. So they poop in 6-sided cubes. And this has been a huge mystery. How is this possible? Is their intestine a square and it comes out? And no, that is not the case. And it actually took an international team of engineers working together, engineers and biologists, to figure this out. And I will not give away the end of the story. You'll have to tune in. But they solved the mystery of why an animal can poop in cubes, and that you can fit a square poop out of a round hole. And they won the Ig Nobel Prize for that research.
I don't think we can top that. Thank you very much, everyone. No.
But I think that this also, when we're telling stories, we tell stories all the way from the great and inspiring to also the small things that we can all relate to. And that's the wonderful, amazing thing about science, and that we're trying to do. We're trying to help people see how science can reveal so much about our lives and also is impacting so much about our lives, to get people engaged in these ideas, in these principles, and in decisions about the world and what science will do, what questions science will seek to answer, and who is going to benefit from the riches that science reveals. So for us, the more people, it's so important, and the work that you do is also just all related to getting more people to understand these scientific principles and scientific ideas and know that their lives can change depending on what we do in science.
I so enjoyed our conversation this afternoon. So I want you to touch on a couple of things. First of all, where does our curiosity and imagination come from? Your thoughts about how we as Americans deal with that curiosity, and where we rank among other countries, other industrialized nations.
Well, when you talk about the origin of curiosity, I think it has to do with our evolution, that we humans are actually not equipped to survive very well in the forest. We have no claws to speak of. We can't fly. Our skin is very thin. We don't run very fast. Our eyesights are awful compared to like hawks. So what do we have going for us, right? We have, of course, a big brain, but we have the imagination to go with it. And I think that is from childhood. When you look at children, they're born scientists. Children want to know where they came from. Children want to know what's it all about? Why did the stars shine? Things like that. And when they hit the age of 10, I think they have this epiphany that all of a sudden they realize that mommy and daddy are not the universe. There's a whole universe beyond mommy and daddy at around the age of 10. And that's when you buy them a telescope. That's when you get them interested in going to the planetarium, about getting them a microscope and talking about the world beyond mommy and daddy. And then it's all over. They hit the greatest destroyer of scientists known to science. The greatest destroyer of scientists known to science is junior high school. When kids hit junior high school, I mean, it's all over. All of a sudden, scientists are portrayed as being nerdy, being socially awkward, unpopular, and all of a sudden, people realize that science can be boring. It's memorization, memorizing facts and figures that are of total irrelevance to your future life, have no relevance whatsoever, except, of course, getting a good score on an exam, which grades on the basis of memorizing facts and figures that are totally irrelevant. So I think we have to reach kids at about that age, okay? Now, what reaches kids about that age? Comic books, for example. And what's the hottest thing in comic books these days? It's the multiverse, okay? Kids come up to me and want to know about the multiverse. Why? Because the Avengers live in the multiverse. And then you can begin to talk about quantum mechanics with kids. You can begin to tell them that an electron can be two places at the same time. How's that possible? Well, we don't know. But that's the reason why we have lasers. That's the reason why we have transistors. That's the reason why we have computers. The internet, the whole thing about the computer revolution is based on one idea, that the electron can be two places at the same time, okay? And how do you deal with that? Well, one way, of course, is the way that most modern physicists deal with it. The universe splits in half. In one universe, the electron went to the left. In another universe, the electron went to the right. And that could also, of course, affect life as we know it. You put a cat in a box, connect the cat to a gun, connect the gun to uranium, and uranium is a quantum mechanical device. So whether it fires or not determines whether or not the cat is dead or alive. And then, of course, people ask me the big question. Is Elvis Presley still alive in a parallel universe? And the answer is, well, yeah. There could be another parallel universe where Elvis Presley is still alive. And then the next question is, why can't you talk to him? Why can't you meet this other universe of ours? Okay? And the answer is that we have decohered from that other universe. We no longer vibrate in unison with that other universe where Elvis Presley is still alive. And therefore, it's very difficult to talk to Elvis Presley as a consequence. Steve Weinberg, the Nobel laureate, likes to tell this story. In your living room is a radio. That radio is tuned to one frequency. You can hear your favorite songs on that one frequency because your radio has decohered from all the other frequencies. It's no longer vibrating in unison with all the other radio stations, which are also in your living room. But in your living room is also the Schrodinger wave, the wave of electrons. They also exist in many frequencies, but your body is only tuned to one frequency. It has decohered from all the other frequencies. In your living room are the wave functions of dinosaurs, the wave functions of aliens from other star systems, the wave functions of an Earth that never coalesced to form life, a lifeless Earth. All of that is inside your living room, but you cannot communicate with them because we have decohered from these other universes. And that applies to the Big Bang. What happened before the Big Bang? Children ask that question, right? Well, Einstein says the universe is a bubble of some sort. We live on the skin of the bubble, and the bubble is expanding. That's called the Big Bang Theory, as seen on CBS TV. The new theory says that there are other bubbles out there, that we live in a bubble bath of universes. And these bubbles can fission in half or collide to create a big bubble, and that's called the Big Bang. So the Big Bang is nothing but a multiverse, a bubble bath of parallel universes, right? And one day we will test this theory. How do we test this theory? By putting gravity wave detectors in outer space. Of course, that's very expensive. We can't do it now. But gravity wave detectors already won the Nobel Prize for several physicists. We detect radiation from colliding black holes. In the future, we will detect radiation from the instant of the Big Bang. You see, the radiation you see from the Big Bang today that you can Google on your website, that radiation from the Big Bang is only radiation 300,000 years after the Bang. It's not from the instant of the Big Bang at all. That's a misnomer. It's radiation left over from the afterglow 300,000 years after the Big Bang. We want to get baby pictures of the infant universe at the instant of the Big Bang, not 300,000 years afterwards. All the NOVA shows, all the TV shows you see about the Big Bang, they show a picture of the radiation. That's radiation 300,000 years after the Big Bang. We want to get it at the instant of the Big Bang with a gravity wave detector in outer space. We want to see the infant universe emerge from the womb. And some of us believe that we will detect an umbilical cord connecting our baby universe to the multiverse of universes. In other words, we'll be able to prove experimentally, not today, but at some point in the future, we'll be able to prove the existence of other universes.
So, Chip, I'm going to come to you in a minute. I have to follow up, though. Who created the universe?
That's the next question. That's my next book.
Well, wait,
know.
if there's an umbilical cord involved, it was hamburgers and French fries, right? We already
Oh
covered
my!
this.
Are we going to go back to that again? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, we don't know, but we think that there's a bubble bath of universes, that universes are being created all the time, even as we speak. Since the beginning of this program, universes have been created because the quantum theory is not deterministic. The quantum theory says there's a probability that universes are being formed all the time. That's a consequence of quantizing the universe, that things that are very, very improbable become possible in the quantum theory. Something that Arthur C. Clarke would love, that the impossible become possible if you wait long enough. And that, on a scale of universes, means that universes are being created all the time. Big bangs are happening all the time.
So, is God involved?
Well, Einstein did not believe in a personal God, a God that comes from on high to create the universe. He believed in the God of Spinoza, that is the God of harmony, beauty, simplicity, elegance. The universe could have been chaotic. It could have been ugly. It could have been a mist of subatomic particles that are unstable. That could have been the universe. But no, here we are talking about this. Rational creatures. It didn't have to be that way. So Einstein thought that he's a child going into this huge library for the first time. A library that talks about all the laws of the universe. And all we can do is open up the first book and read the first paragraph of this gigantic book. So he considered the universe to be a library of knowledge, that we only have access to the first chapter, first paragraph of the first book.
Chip, let me turn to you because your writings have been full of curiosity and imagination. So, what makes you curious?
Well, I find my curiosity falling somewhere between you and you, between you and
Julia.
Julia. Yeah. Which is to say, I went through a long period where I became more and more interested, not in poop, but in garbage. Just garbage. You learn, you learn an amazing amount by looking through the garbage. And I mean, anthropology, as we know it, is basically the study of garbage today. I mean, physical anthropology, at least historical anthropology. There are literature has changed because of manuscripts found in the middens of Hermopolis in the middle of Egypt, because somebody went through an old garbage pit and found a play by or poetry by Sappho, a set of Sappho's poem, or a play by what's his name, Anacreon, and things of this sort. And I once tried, just as an experiment, I tried to write a story in which the hero was the town garbage man, because he knew so much about the society, because he was always collecting the garbage, and he had a lot of knowledge about it, just to see where it would go. And then I got obsessed with it, and I wrote a very big novel, the two heroes of which were garbage men. And it became downright obsessive after a while. And it's interesting. And the other thing it was about was Spinoza. So, But these ideas can be both fun, and they can also be, they also can lead to a lot of things that are upsetting, and they can also lead to a lot of things that are fascinating. So you try it out, and you try to tell as much of the truth as you can bear, and then you start to lie your ass off.
So I'm going to give you a moment to think about this, but one individual and one question that you want to ask that person. So think about that. I don't want the answer. I just want the question. Questions from the audience? We'll get the microphones, so feel free to jump in. This is a question from one of our viewers saying, it's been said, including tonight, that there is such a profound interest to discover life elsewhere. But what happens if that life is not intelligent? Would the reaction be much more ho-hum? Julia?
If the life we, well, I think there's high chance that we will discover life in my lifetime.
You believe that?
I think there's a good chance that we will discover life beyond Earth in my lifetime.
And you're only 25, so you have a long life ahead.
I did admit I've been at Nova for 30 years, so, but thank you.
My math was never good.
I am not optimistic about discovering intelligent life. I mean, you're asking about the reaction. I think it's a huge deal if we discover any life. I think, we're thinking a lot about timing. I mean, it's a very long universe. The distances are very far. We have existed for this tiny little bit. And our intelligence, I think, is questionable in terms of our sustainability and the sustainability of our intelligent society. So I think the chance of us coinciding with another technologically advanced civilization and connecting, I think, is low, but I don't think that means that it doesn't exist. I think for all the reasons Chris talked about, just finding life and being able to define what life is, just to me would be huge.
Yeah, I think they're out there. We've discovered 4,000 planets orbiting other stars. We can take a census of the Milky Way galaxy for the first time. For the first time in history, we know that on average, every single star you see at night has a planet going around it. And maybe 1 in 20 have Earth-like planets going around them on average. And that's just in our sector of the Milky Way galaxy. So in our own backyard, there are probably billions of planets that can harbor oxygen, atmosphere, liquid water, oceans, and so on and so forth. So I think they're out there. But then the next question is, can they reach us? Can they reach us from these large distances, right? And that's where scientists divide on the question. A lot of scientists snicker, their eyes roll up, and they say it would take thousands of years for a rocket ship with chemical rockets to reach the planet Earth. But that leaves open the possibility that they could be very advanced, more advanced than anything that we can conceive of. And at that point, then it may be possible to go between the stars. You see, the laws of physics as we know it eventually break down. When we say that things violate the laws of physics, we have to realize that the laws of physics themselves begin to break down. They break down at what is called the Planck energy. The Planck energy is 10 to the 19 billion electron volts. Take our most powerful machine, the Large Hadron Collider. The Planck energy is a quadrillion times more powerful than the Large Hadron Collider. We're talking about energy on a scale of a black hole, on a scale of a Big Bang. So any civilization that can travel through time, travel through space, would have to have access to the Planck energy. And then the question is, how long will it take for a civilization to attain that status? Well, we physicists, believe it or not, rank civilizations. A type 1 civilization is planetary. They control the weather. They control planetary forces, sort of like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. That's type 1. Type 2 is stellar. They consume the energy output of an entire star. That's type 2, like the Federation of Planets in Star Trek. Star Trek would be a type 2 civilization. Then there's type 3, which is galactic. They roam the galactic space lanes. They play with black holes. That's type 3, a galactic civilization. And then the question is, which of these civilizations can access the Planck energy? Type 1, no. Type 2, no. What about us? What are we on the scale? We are type 0. We don't even rate on this scale. We're not even type 1, okay? Because, well, we will become type 1 in about 100 years. You take a calculator, do the calculations, not very hard. We'll become type 1 in about 100 years, okay? That's where we're headed for. That is the ultimate destiny of civilization as we know it, to become type 1, planetary. But to go between the stars requires Planck energy, that is type 3. And that is, if you then do the calculation, growing at 3% per year in terms of energy consumption, it would be about 100,000 to 1,000,000 years more advanced than us, which is nothing compared to the age of the universe. What is 1,000,000 years when the universe is 13.8 billion years old? So if there is a civilization that can become stable for on a scale of maybe 1,000,000 years, 100,000 years, they may achieve the energy to go between the stars. And that's through what is called a wormhole. Now, my colleague, the late Stephen Hawking, wrote extensively about wormholes. They are gateways to go across tremendous distances in a blink of an eye. If you want to see the first wormhole in English literature, it is Through the Looking Glass about Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
The Looking Glass is a wormhole. That novel was written by a professional mathematician, Charles Dodgson, writing under the pseudonym Lewis Carroll. But that is a wormhole. The Looking Glass is what a spaceship would look like in the far future. You stick your hand through the wormhole, and your hand winds up on the other side of the universe. So at that point, yeah, they might exist. Now, what is 1,000,000 years on the scale of 13.8 billion years? But don't expect them to land on the White House lawn. Don't expect them to give us the benefit of their technology. Because if you're walking down a street and you see a bunch of ants, do you go down to the ants and say, I bring you trinkets? I bring you beads. I give you nuclear energy. Take me to your Ant Queen. Or do you have this politically incorrect urge to step on a few of them? I mean, if you're in the forest and you meet a squirrel, do you want to talk to the squirrel? Well, initially, yeah, maybe you want to talk to the squirrel, but then you get bored because the squirrel doesn't talk back to you. In other words, we're boring. Why should they want to land on the White House lawn? We have nothing to offer them, okay? So I think that, yeah, A, they're out there. B, can they reach us? Well, yeah, if they're type 3, they could reach us. But C, why should they bother?
Well, that's good. I'm always whenever somebody talks in large theories, it's just a natural reaction. It has nothing to do with you personally. But I always think of the exception. That I've closest exceptions. Many years ago, I had a friend who had a long ponytail. It was a rather handsome ponytail, which he kept in a little band. And I remember he would come up to my house in where I lived in Amherst, Massachusetts, when I was a professor of comparative literature at Amherst. And we had a squirrel outside. And he said, squirrels do talk. And he said, I said, do they? And I'm just listening. He said, yeah, they talk with their tails. And he said, I'll show you. And so he sat out on the street, and the squirrel came up, and the squirrel was shaking his head. So he took the thing, and he shook his ponytail. And the squirrel stopped and looked, and they began to shake their tails at one another. And he says, I'm not sure what I'm saying, but I know that he feels like he understands it. And he or she, as the case may be, it may well have been a she squirrel, But, and they sat out there shaking tails at one another for like 20 minutes.
Maybe they were flirting with each other.
Yeah, they could have been. They could have been. But the squirrel was clearly fascinated with someone who knew how to talk squirrel. And this, and as I said, I watched this with my own eyes, and I still remember it. And it comes back to me when you say squirrels don't talk and they're boring. I did get tired after about 20 minutes. So maybe because but I wanted more. I did want to find, and if there was a way, and if I could figure out an operational way of getting further, then we got Justin, with Bert sitting there going.
Well, the squirrel probably got hungry.
Yeah, well, no, the squirrel was willing. The squirrel was willing to spend a lot more. Bert got bored first. Definitely there was the humans involved lost interest before the squirrel. The squirrel was absolutely fascinated with someone who would shake his ponytail back at the squirrel.
So if I try that at home and I'm being taken away, I'm going to turn to you. Okay?
Okay,
Come to my
all right.
defense.
So look, there's something missing from this in a sense. So yeah, let's say we're the ants, right? However, we're curious about ants, right? We don't go to ants because they can give us something. We're curious about them. So the question really is, for me, it's two questions. If you imagine this advanced civilization that can move around, how curious are they? And how much uniqueness is there among life around the universe? In other words, if everything kind of looks the same everywhere, then seeing us, they've seen it before, it's not that interesting. But if there's something unique about the ants, I think curiosity could potentially be the thing that would bring them here. But again, the 100,000 years or the million years, I mean, Homo sapiens, 100,000 years old or so, and somehow, human beings have traversed that 100,000 years. And so the idea of, if we become a type 1 civilization at the end of the century or in 100 years, another 100,000 years doesn't seem to be, I'm not a pessimist. I don't think we're all going to blow ourselves up. I think we're really good at adapting to things. Maybe slightly too late, but we still somehow do it. And another 100,000 years seems completely plausible. And so, I agree. I just think that and by the way, the question of what if the life is not intelligent, there's a big difference between intelligence and technological. I mean, there could be look, human beings intelligent, presumably for human beings or Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, whatever, hundreds of thousands of years with culture and art and things like that. No technology, just what we think of as modern technology, that's just like a blip, a recent little eruption in our history. So, and there are arguably other intelligent animals on this planet. Squirrels?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about squirrels, but
One of the things that Michio said at the beginning, and I think he snuck it in and I think it's very important. And I agree, is that so far we have not developed intelligent life. We've come close. We can see what intelligence might be. But I don't think we're concerned. Intelligence comes when you're concerned with the proper things. And there is so much we are not concerned with, like garbage. I mean, garbage is one of the big problems that we have as a species right now. Packaging is a huge, existential problem that may destroy the planet. And things like that. And we do need to sort of, we have smarts, but we don't necessarily have intelligence. We have an ability to control and tell stories and in where we are looking. But intelligence starts with look in the proper direction. The proper direction may be down at the grass, or it may be in the garbage, in the garbage bin, or it may be up in the sky. I have found, back in 1986, I was at Cornell as a fellow at the Andrew D. White House, And the New York Times published a fascinating photograph on the front of the science section. It was the first photograph of chlorine atoms. It was an actual photograph of it. I cut it out and hung it on the blackboard, saying, "Hey guys, you can now see the damn things. We've been talking about them. We've been talking about them since since Democritus. These acuttable things that a little while ago we discovered, came apart quite spectacularly, releasing lots of energy. But now we have actually seen the darn things in salt crystals. And and this is a kind of the fact that somebody had actually taken a picture of them, so that people could now look at them. It could be published in a black and white photograph on the front page of a section of the Times. I thought was a real step. And so as I said, nobody ever mentioned the fact that there was this photograph now of atoms on the thing. But I think that things like that were important. I don't know whether what I'm doing is more intelligent than anybody else. I don't think. I suspect it's not. But I do think it's probably worthwhile putting some thought into where it would be useful to put some of the smarts that we definitely have. We can, because of all the technical things we can do. We can make iPhones. One of the least effective pieces of technology that is it's very good, but it doesn't compete with landlines. It doesn't. We're still dropping calls and things like that. And the fact that we do slip backwards and things like that, I think is also kind of interesting. I'm the guy who wrote in the last century the problem. I wrote this in a Village Voice article in the 90s. I said, Dr. Du Bois said that the problem of the 20th century was going to be the color line. Well, Samuel Delany says that the problem of the 21st century is going to be misinformation. How did I know?
Okay, so lightning round, and then we'll get your
Yeah.
question. So stand up with the microphone, I believe. Again, a historical figure, who you'd want to ask and what the question would be. Julia, who would that be? Not a speech, just a person and a question.
I'm going to say, because this relates to the very first NOVA that I worked on, which is about how the pyramids were built. So I would like to be able to interview the engineer to get he or she to explain how all the details of how they built the pyramids. I want to make sure I can film it too.
Okay.
You could what? What was the last?
That I can film it.
Oh, you can film
Yes.
it. Okay.
I think we will start to digitize people within the next few years. William Shatner, just last week, it was announced that he's being digitized. That is, he's being interviewed for 4 days, asked thousands of questions about his life, his early years, memories, whatever. A software computer program then chops it up, puts it in logical sequence so that you can ask William Shatner any question you want. And a holographic image will emerge that will talk back to you. And I think that's going to be the future of how we will talk to our descendants. That historically, our ancestors left only 2 lines in a book in a church, summarizing their entire life. The day they were born and the day they died. And that is the history of your ancestors. In the future, your credit card transactions, your digital fingerprint, Instagram photographs, your diaries, everything will be digitized if you want. And a holographic image will emerge that looks like you, talks like you, but is immortal. So I think digital immortality is coming very soon. First steps have already been taken. And this means that you will be able to talk to your great-great-great-great-great-grandkids, not yet born, and they will be able to talk to their great-great-great-great-great ancestor who died, centuries ago, because we will have digital immortality, and it's coming sooner than you think. I would love to talk to Einstein. I think very soon someone will digitize everything known about him, his records, his letters, his interviews. His whole archives is in Israel right now. And it's being, of course, sorted through. Eventually it'll be digitized. Somebody will put a photographic image next to it. And I think that's the library of the future. When kids write a biography of Winston Churchill, they will talk to Winston Churchill because someone will have digitized everything known about Winston Churchill, put it in a narrative form so that you can talk to it. So I think we will also become immortal. Digital immortality is coming very soon. There's a company in Silicon Valley already offering for a price to digitize your digital signature, everything known about you. In the future, it'll be put in human form so that people can talk to you. And I think that's how we might even explore the universe. I think that digital information is pure digital. Well, we can put it on a laser beam and shoot it to the moon. In 1 second, you're on the moon. No booster rockets, no accidents, no cosmic rays to worry about. In 15 minutes, you're on Mars. In 4 years, you're on the stars. I call this laser porting, and I think this is by far the most efficient way to explore the galaxy using technology that's maybe only 100 years more advanced than the technology today, to explore the universe as a light beam, to be digitized, put on a light beam, shot throughout the galaxy. In fact, I'll stick my neck out now, and I claim that this may already exist, that any intelligent life in the galaxy would say, what is the most efficient way to explore the galaxy? Send Captain Kirk from star to star? No, that's the most inefficient way to explore the galaxy. The most efficient way is to digitize yourself, put your consciousness on a light beam, shoot yourself throughout the galaxy, and then explore the universe. And I think that this could already exist. There could be a laser highway not too far from the planet Earth, carrying the souls, the digitized souls of billions of aliens, and we are too stupid to even know of its existence. We haven't even thought of that. But it is the most efficient way to colonize the galaxy at the speed of light, with no booster rocket failure, no problems with weightlessness, nothing. Just pure light exploring the universe.
But what question would you ask Einstein?
Well, I would ask him what he thinks of string theory. This is what I work on. I'd want to know what he
detect
thinks.
a little bit of bias there.
He spent 30 years chasing after the theory of everything, and he failed. I could read the book. I can read his failed manuscript now. I can go through all the equations, and I see all the dead ends that he tried, which we can now solve using string theory. That doesn't mean it's correct. It just means that I would be curious to find out what his opinion is, given the fact that a lot of the dead ends that he found 30 years ago can actually be solved using string theory.
Chris, who's on your list? What figure and what question?
Let's see. I would like to talk to the first, I'd like to ask a question of the first primate who touched the black monolith and was made intelligent, right? And what that was like. No, actually,
And you probably want to record it too, right?
yeah. No, actually, you know what? It's a hard question for me because my mind doesn't. It's hard for me to. My mind works through associations, jumping from one thing to another. So I'm being asked to jump out in the void and pick something. But it did occur to me. I'd like to talk to the first person to ride a horse. I'd like to ask them, what gave you that idea? It's so ridiculously improbable in a way.
Get on top of this thing.
Get on top of this great big thing that doesn't want me anywhere near it. Like, what made you, why did you do that? What were you hoping to get out of it?
Chip, who's on your list?
Okay. Well, one of the things that happened actually did happen when I was about 10, when I was about 11. My father and myself and my father's best friend, B.B. Jackson, went down to Belvedere Lake and were trying to sail a boat, which didn't work because it was B.B.'s birthday present to me. And it in the manner of adults when they have a birthday present for a 12-year-old, they had completely commandeered it and what have you. While we were standing there, an elderly German man with very fuzzy white hair came wandering up and sort of stood around and watched and began talking in a German accent and sort of said, you know, that's an interesting boat and what have you, and talked. And I looked at it and I said, I've seen this guy's picture on Time magazine about a year ago. And yeah, and I was dead sure that it was Einstein. And he talked to us for about 10 minutes. He tried to work on the boat. And then he said, no, it's a lovely job of carving, but it's not, but it's just balanced wrong. You're never going to get it working and what have you. And he then took off. And later on, about 3 years, and I said, I know this is Einstein. And about 3 years later, yeah, I read that one of his hobbies was model boats. And he had just been walking across, you know. What I would like to, I then had a dream.
But you didn't ask him about string theory.
No, I didn't. I didn't ask him anything. I didn't know. I didn't ask him whether he was Einstein or anything. But I knew it was Einstein. And then I told my father, and I said, you know, that was Albert Einstein. And they said, no. And then Bibi said, you know, it could have been. It certainly looked like it. But anyway, I then had a dream. And the dream was that Einstein, I met Einstein. He was standing in our living room, and he explained everything to me.
Wow.
Absolutely everything. And I thought, how great. I would love, if I ever met, I'd like to meet him. And I'd like to say, could you explain that to me one more time?
Aren't dreams great?
Yeah.
Okay, couple final questions. First of all, Julia, this is for you. Outside of NOVA, how do you make science more interesting to students?
Outside of Nova?
Because you're so interesting.
I'm sorry.
How do you make science more interesting to students outside of the program you do at NOVA?
Well, I think what we're doing with Nova and what great teachers do is engage students. We do it through storytelling, but I think great teachers do the same thing. They engage students in storytelling. We know that people learn and retain the most when the more of their brain is engaged. So that includes, sight and sound and touch and emotion. So I think really doing things, again, not memorizing a lot of big words or a lot of facts, but really engaged in doing things, doing experiments, observing the world, asking questions, and helping students, follow their own questions and find answers. So actually doing science rather than talking about it.
And Chris, could you do what you're doing without WGBH?
Well, I spent most of my
No.
I spent most of my career as a freelance filmmaker, and I've been at GBH and Nova for 10 years, but I made films for Nova as a filmmaker. So Nova couldn't do what it's doing without GBH. And certainly
And PBS.
and PBS, certainly the value system, the value proposition of PBS, and GBH is really one of the founding stations of the network. The value proposition is that it's not, in some ways, it's not different than the value proposition of a commercial network like Discovery Channel or whatever. Both are trying to engage an audience, but they have different purposes, right? So I heard, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, that when Nixon signed the law that established the public broadcasting service, one of the reasons he wanted to do it was because the commercial networks that were all kind of monolithic top-down networks were all after him, and that he liked the idea of a grassroots member station organization that wouldn't be controlled by any one kind of political force. And so whether that's true or not, that is really the great strength of that system that we're in. It's not, as I said, monolithic, controlled by a big corporate entity. It's controlled by all the member stations in a way. And the proposition is we want to engage the viewers, not because when I was doing shows for Discovery Channel and others, I used to kind of joke that our job was really in the programming we were making. Our job was really to kind of deliver the viewer to the commercial. That was all we were really trying to do. We were trying to wrap bubble pack around the viewer in terms of fun content, and then just bring them to the commercial for the advertisers. What we're doing, and what Nova does, and PBS and GBH, make possible for us to do, is to try to have that same kind of engagement with the viewer. But the only purpose we have is for the edification and the entertainment and the betterment of the viewer, not for any other entity. And so, there's only one, just like life, we've only got one instance of life on Earth. We only have one instance of public broadcasting in the United States. And so, to that extent, what we do would not exist in the way that it is, for sure, without that system.
So let me conclude, and any one of you can take this question, and it is one of the questions we got from the public as well, is how do you spark imagination among adults? Because we get so set in our ways, we get so focused on our jobs, our career. How do you spark imagination? You're smiling.
Well, I think that you have people who are passionate, who they themselves are excited and enthusiastic and curious, and people who can communicate how that joy that we all have as children, and I believe we all have in our cores. This is a fundamental part of being human, of wondering about the universe, the world, all these questions. And to have gifted people who can communicate that joy, that passion, that curiosity, that is contagious. So that's for us. We want to get those people who have that power to infect people with curiosity.
I would say, if I could add to that real quickly, I'm more and more convinced, especially in the last year and a half, that we are trying to engage with everybody in the United States. We think that having a basic understanding of science makes people better citizens, better able to make decisions, a better grounding in reality, for example. But honestly, I'm more and more think to myself that that there are people who just don't seem to have the kind of curiosity that's sparkable, or not easily sparkable. So, for example, when I look at people who, let's say, think COVID is a hoax or something, because they've never experienced it and then nobody around them has experienced it, it feels to me like there are people in the world who are perfectly wonderful, nice people, but who are not, who are, and I'm just putting this in a very clumsy way, it's not accurate really, but it's just the way I think about it. There's some people who are very concrete in their thinking. COVID, I heard about it, I haven't seen it, I haven't experienced it, I don't think I'm going to take it seriously. And then there are people who naturally are abstract thinkers, who say, well, then, they'll follow a train of thought in a way that'll makes that they're perfectly comfortable being in an imagined world that they haven't actually visited themselves. I can imagine that this disease could get me. I could imagine that it could get somebody that I know, even though it hasn't happened. I could imagine it. And I think that what we can do with our programs is some of and we're lucky because we can do a lot of different topics and a lot of different styles. Week after week, you never know what you're going to get. We have some programs that we know are clearly aimed at those people who have that kind of ability to imagine things that aren't real. And then that drives their curiosity. But at the same time, we are making programs that are very concrete, that the job really isn't so much to spark people's curiosity, it's to arm them with useful knowledge that they can take with them, maybe communicate to people that are around them. Things like if we make a film about climate change, we don't say, oh, climate change, human beings are bad, we're all destroying the planet. We'll say, like, you've heard these scientists talking about this thing called climate change. What are they looking at? And you can kind of follow.
You're asking the questions.
We ask the questions, and we can put in front of people something that's very concrete. We can say, look at that. We don't deny, nobody argues about that thing. And then we ask the questions, and we try to bring, using the story, telling a good story, we try to bring them along for the ride. So I think that sparking curiosity and through imagination, It's imagination and curiosity go together. It's a noble thing to try to do, but I don't think that if that is our only measure of success with our product, that we're really succeeding. Because there's a need to serve people who are not. That's just not the way they tick. That's the way I think about
I want to give you a minute to conclude because you're standing in the way of dessert, but please.
it.
Imagination among adults. You get the last word.
Well, I like to think in terms of evolution. Like 100,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers in the forest. What did we do at the campfire? What did we do after the hunt? Okay. Well, we told stories. Stories about, oh, we captured that mammoth. Oh, we almost got that saber-toothed tiger, whatever. We would talk about stories. Next, we talk about the future. What are we going to do tomorrow? Now, that separates us from the animals. Let's do an experiment. Go home tonight and talk to your dog about tomorrow. No, it's something everyone can do.
And
Go
the
home
squirrel
tonight
comes in.
If
and
you have
talk
a
to your
dog.
Along with
dog
the
Squirrel.
about
Squirrel.
tomorrow. Okay? Dogs do not understand tomorrow. Animals do not understand tomorrow. This is what the prefrontal cortex is all about. It's a time machine. We do something that the animals cannot. We imagine the future, which animals cannot do because they live in the present. They live in instinct. We cannot survive on instinct because we have no claws. We don't fly. Our eyesights are awful. We can't hear very well. Smelling, we can't smell with crap. So the point is that what we have that animals don't have is the imagination of the future, which is what the prefrontal cortex is all about.
Just one thing that was coming through. I needless to say, I find this all fascinating. But one of the things that I hear a lot is you guys are trying to normalize this thing. You're trying to talk about it, And how to inspire kids? It's very easy. It's forbidden. Stay away from it. That's the way to inspire the kids. Stay away from it. You don't want to deal with this. It's slightly dangerous. Sometimes it's even fun. Don't think about that. That's the way to inspire the kids.
You have been a great audience, and you have all rightly deserved the Clarke Award. So thank you very much. And we'll turn to Walda for the final word. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Very glad you're doing
Um,
it.
I think it was Arthur C. Clarke said that if there is intelligent life in the universe, it scares me to death. If there isn't intelligent life in the universe, it scares me to death. So let's hope that we at least have we can create intelligent life here through our imaginations and inspire the children as well as the adults. Listen, I want to thank you. We've got a few things we're going to do here, and I ask you to stay seated for a few minutes. One of them is a surprise in that there is somebody who has made this and so many of these affairs possible for 13 years, who has kept the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation going and growing, and who is terribly uncomfortable in getting attention. But she has decided that she's going to explore whether there's just a little bit of life beyond the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation, and is going to be retiring. She'll stay on the board for a year as our executive director at the end of this year. So the Clarke board decided that we couldn't just let that pass. And I would ask Tim if you would come up here, and Joe, if you could bring Monica out here. Oops, we forgot Monica.
You want to say
There
something
you-
first?
Okay. Monica Morgan We all love you. We respect you. And we have something special for you, but it's going to arrive at your house at some time because we didn't have you to make sure that it was delivered here. However, it is a crystal vase that has etched in it. And do you want to read this, Tim?
Well, again, because we thought of it late, we didn't have much time to be very creative with it. I think we needed Chip or maybe Stan to help us. But it simply says, with deepest appreciation, Monica Morgan, for extraordinary contributions to the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation and the journey of imagination. You should see it by the end of the week.
So,
We also needed something that would fit on the vase.
okay. So just let me personally say to somebody who has become a dear friend and a valued colleague, we spar sometimes, but we end up in the same place because we can imagine what we want to have happen. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So now Monica reminds me that there's a little bit more business to do here. First of all, let me announce the winners of the auction. And when this is over, I've got a few more people and others to thank. But when this is over, Tim will be out by the desk where you checked in to take your money and to give you uh, your winnings. The the winners are Eric Loeb. By the way, thank you all for this. Jordan Hassim, Eric Vire, Ruth Pritchard Kelly, Asan Murad, Judith O'Neill, Darius Nasiri, and Zenny Logue. And I think Zenny knows who you are, right? Okay. So thank you. Thank you so very, very much for that. Now, I also want to thank a, a number of people here who I hope that there is a slide for this, Monica. Okay. Yeah, because I left my information under the desk back there. But I want to thank all of our program partners who have helped put this together, and you will find them in your program that you will get. I want to thank each of our sponsors. And Monica, do we have a slide for that? There we go. If we can go through these, Google, which has been a mainstay donator for us, Hughes, an EchoStar company, which has also been responsible for the beautiful logo and all of the things that are printed here in the sign. Go ahead, Monica. Utelsat, Iridium, Optimal, Internet Society, Salesforce, the Honorable Diana Dugan, the not so honorable Walda Roseman, Stacy Swan, Penguin Random House, who also donated the books and is the publisher of our two authors here. And thank you for being table sponsors as well. And then Edward and Debbie Horowitz, Flying Colors, OneWeb, and a number of our board members, Ruth Pritchard Kelly, Joe Brovman, Tim Logue, Michael Nelson, Charlie Schott, and Vincent Walesko. Thank you for your sponsorship and contributions. They will go to a very good cause. Yes, and I also want to thank Mintz and SES Satellite Company. Now, there are a number of people who I'd also like to thank who have labored in the field. I've mentioned Monica. I would like to also thank Constance Chatfield Taylor back there, who's a member of our board and also the founder of Flying Colors and her team. And she does this and they do this year after year, including those wonderful videos that you'll be watching if you haven't already. I'd like to thank all of our volunteers. If you would stand up if you're in here, just so we can see you. This is not a rookie team. Thank you. They know what they're doing. Thank you so much. We'd like to thank the French Embassy, who's been very kind, and our caterer that has been, I would say, prepared extraordinary meals and appetizers for us. And our board of directors. Would the members of the board who are here please stand up? Who? Yes. Thank you. And not least, I'd like to thank our wonderful photographer who's also helped us with marketing and other things and become a friend, Holly Russell. Holly, would you just stand up? And there is one group of people that I have not thanked who are incredibly important, and that's you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence and with your interest and with your curiosity. And I say that to those of you who are in this room and who are still watching virtually. And of course, thank you to our awardees and our moderator and those who have introduced our awardees. What an extraordinary group of people and what an extraordinary program NOVA is. So thank you very much. And now, those of you who have won the auction, please go, but take with you a cup of coffee and a dessert. And the rest of you, go on outside. We have dessert and there's some mingle time. Thank you very much.